Welcome to the Songbird Sade Knits podcast. My name is Mercedes and I'm coming to you from Guelph, Ontario, Canada. And this is my space on YouTube where I share with you my knitting progress and other crafts, mostly woolly based crafts. Today is kind of a nice day actually. It's not too cold outside and it was sunny earlier, but it's getting a little bit overcast. So I will try not to make this video too long so that I can go outside, and I might even take some videos of the garden to share with you some of the buds and flowers and things that are coming up out there. Of course, you can find me on Instagram as Songbird Sade, and you can also find me on Ravelry as Songbird Sade Knits. And so welcome back, and thank you for joining me. I'm going to start by showing you some finished things. I've been knitting a lot. We're in another lockdown here in Ontario, and actually I'm not working this time. Usually we've been working through some of the sort of lockdowns or stay-at-home orders, but we decided not to this time, and I think it's for the best. So we've been able to stay at home and be safe, and therefore I've been knitting a lot. So the first finished thing I want to show you is this lovely sweater. This is a Jennifer Steingass pattern, and this is called, I believe it's called Dark Water. As always, by the way, with past videos and with this video, I always put all of my show notes below in the description box, and any designer or pattern, shop, or other reference that I make, I always provide a link below so you can check it out if you're interested. So again, this is the Dark Water pattern by Jennifer Steingass. And for this I used Briggs & Little Sport Weight yarn. That's a Canadian company. I don't think the pattern calls for sport weight. It might be written for DK, possibly even fingering. In any case, my gauge wasn't correct, and as I never do gauge swatches, which I know is really bad, but I don't really mind unknitting a little bit if I can tell that it's not going to be the right size. Anyway, I don't do gauge swatches. I didn't do one for this. So what I did was I just picked a larger size than what I would normally knit, and cast on for the neck, and then knit for a little bit and kind of realized that that wasn't going to be the right size, so I increased again to the next size up, and then I think I had to increase again to even the next size up, and then once I got there, I basically achieved the increases for the neckline, and then I just followed the instructions for the size that I had ended up with, and I followed those instructions all the way down and for the sleeves, and it ended up fitting really well. I'm very happy with the way the sleeves fit, and as it is a cropped sweater, I'll show you so you can stand up and show you. The original isn't cropped, but I made mine cropped because I intend to wear it mostly in the cusp and summer seasons, over dresses and high-waisted skirts. So I like a cropped sweater. I think it looks better with that silhouette. As mine is cropped, it ended up being a pretty good size in the waist area. If it weren't cropped, I would have done waist shaping, which I think it calls for in the pattern. Yeah, I'll show you again the fit. Hopefully you can see the back. And I would say overall, I am quite happy with this sweater. It turned out pretty much as I imagined. The only thing that kind of bothers me just a little bit is that even after blocking, you can see when I raise my arms, there's this little bit of a fold that happens here. And that is because the top part of the yoke, where I sort of totally improvised the increases, that top part of the yoke is a bit tight. So the ratio sort of stitches here versus the main part of the yoke, the colorwork section, and the body is not quite right. It's not as gradual as it should be. It's a little too tight here for the width that is down here. And so that's why it puckers a little bit there. And that's also why it looks like a bit of a boat neck. It's actually meant to be more of a crew neck collar, but it ended up being a bit of a boat neck because, not because there's too few stitches here for the neckline, but because there's too few for how wide it's supposed to be. So that's what happens, I guess, when you don't do a gauge swatch and then you don't recalculate the design measurements for the gauge that you're using. But overall, I'm really not too concerned with how it turned out. I don't mind the fit. I think it looks still pretty good. Yeah, and that's that. And the only other thing I should mention is that I did actually make a mistake. I omitted a portion of the pattern in the bottom section of this yoke. You can see that there are sort of 3 V's right here before the main part of the pattern, and it's supposed to be mirrored on the bottom, but I missed one of those V's. So it's a little bit unbalanced. But I would think if you're not familiar with the pattern, you wouldn't really perceive that as an issue. It would look like it's meant to be that way. So I'm not too bothered by that, but I have no idea why I missed that. I guess I was in a bit of a rush to finish this one. And the yarn, the colorway is called Brown Heather. It's actually more of a purple colored yarn. And when you see it up close, hopefully you can see that. It is heathered with many, many other colors, really strong, bold colors. So it's a very interesting yarn and colorway up close. But from a distance, it's quite neutral. But with all those other colors, it means it really is versatile and can go with lots of other things. So I'm wearing it with a really sort of royal blue skirt right now, because there is royal blue in here, but it'll match a lot of other things, I think. And then this color here is the Sheep's Gray, which is a favorite of mine by Briggs & Little. And if you've never knit with Briggs & Little before, I highly, highly recommend it. I think it is very durable and holds up really well with wear. It doesn't really pill, and it's soft. It's very rustic feeling, like it has a lot of texture. But I'm wearing this with a t-shirt, and I've worn it with just a bra. It doesn't itch me at all, even on the chest where I find I'm most sensitive. It doesn't bother me at all. It has despite its rustic, very textured feeling, it is very soft, almost like cotton. It reminds me of cotton. You know how cotton can actually be, like, for example, denim can be a little rough feeling, but it's soft on the skin. That's kind of what this wool is like to me. And yeah, it's just absolutely one of my all-time favorites. And in Canada, if you're in Canada, it's really affordable as well. So it really is my go-to for lots of things. So that's one of my finished objects. Moving along, another thing that I finished with stash yarn that I had for many years, actually. I got it in Iceland on a trip. I just I have loved going to the wool shops in Iceland. I love Icelandic wool so much. I love Icelandic sheep. I love Iceland. So the few times that I've been there, I always buy some yarn, even though you actually can buy it in many places outside of Iceland. There's something about just going into the yarn shops there where, you know, wall to wall is just full of Icelandic yarn in all the different weights that they provide. It's very exciting and very inspiring. So I just bought some Einband on a whim. Einband is their single ply lace weight yarn. And I had thought I would make a shawl with it, but the colors I had chosen, I've realized now since then, which was many years ago, are not really my colors. At least paired together, they didn't look very good on me. So I separated the colors that I had and looked for a pattern that I could make with just one or two of the skeins. And I think it was in the Knitting Traditions podcast, Inga knit Jessie May's Summer Secret tank top, and she sort of explained the pattern, and it seemed really easy and fun and a great way to use one skein of yarn. So I decided to make the Summer Secret top, Summer Secret tank by Jessie May. And I had so much fun making this. It was knit up maybe in a day or two, and I ended up using 2 balls of the iron band because I wanted more of a DK weight. And the pattern actually is written for both, or either a DK weight or a lace weight. So, or a fingering. So I went with more of the DK instructions so that I could use up both bands. And I just love this pattern. I love the designer too. I've purchased a number of her patterns now. Her patterns are written with size inclusivity in mind, and also she's very conscientious of making sure that her patterns are accessible to people with different financial capabilities. So I would recommend checking her out. And she has so many cute little tank top and bralette patterns that you could knit with one skein or less. So I plan on knitting more of her things, and this one I'll probably knit another one of these with the other iron band that I have. I have an iron band in more of a like a brownie taupe color. Yeah, this was so much fun. The only thing I'll say about my choice of yarn is that iron band is very scratchy, and I usually don't say this about wool because I'm not very sensitive to wool, and I like to keep an open mind as well, but iron band is very scratchy. I'm not sure why that is, because I don't find Elefas and I don't find Letlopi scratchy at all, and I don't find Plitolopi scratchy. I think the iron band might have more of the longer hairs. So Icelandic sheep actually have sort of 2 types of wool in their coat. They have a more downy layer on the underside, that's their undercoat, and that really provides a lot of insulation. And then they have these longer hairs that are usually darker and a little more coarse and sort of shiny, that stick out beyond that. And so they have sort of 2 different functions in their wool. And I think that the longer hairs are scratchier, and I think the iron band's made with more of that. I'm not totally sure about that. If you know, let me know. But what I did was I soaked the shirt for almost a full day in a bath with hair conditioner, and then I didn't really rinse out the conditioner. I just gave it a quick I put it in a bucket with the conditioner, let it soak, then I dumped it out and just sort of gently patted it, and then put it in a bucket with fresh water, let it sit for like 2 minutes, and then rinsed it, or then just squeezed it out, and that's it. So there probably is still residue from the conditioner in it, which I think is what I was going for. And it did make it quite soft, like just on the hands. It still feels scratchy, but certainly not irritating, and it has a really actually nice feel on your hands. And I'd say I can get away with wearing this for probably 8 hours, not sweating, say, like not doing too much physical activity, and then after that it has to come off. That's when I start to get itchy, and it's that really irritating feeling. So not ideal for next to skin wear. However, I love the color, I love the look, and if I can wear it for a few hours and not be bothered, it's totally worth it, in my opinion. But if you're starting from scratch and you don't already have the yarn, I don't recommend the iron band for this project in particular. Okay, and another knitted item that I finished is my own design, and it's one for which I have written a pattern that is now available on Ravelry. You can find me on Ravelry again as Songbird Sade. As Songbird Sade Knits. Yes, Songbird Sade Knits on Ravelry, and it's a free pattern, so easy for you to give it a try, and I hope you do give it a try. I'll show you the project now. It is called the Sagebrush Scarf. So it is a very, very large, generous scarf. In width, it's about 15 inches, and in length, it's about 17 and a half inches. So it's long and wide, and it uses up almost 5 full skeins of 100-gram skeins of Cascade 220 non-superwash Peruvian Highland yarn. And then it uses up maybe almost 25 grams of some sort of accent yarn, anything of your choice, something from your stash, doesn't really matter. Preferably something with a contrasting color and maybe even a slightly different texture, just to accentuate the striping pattern. And it's done entirely in garter stitch with a slight border at the edges, just a little purl stitch detail, and it's knit using the diagonal knitting technique. So that technique is basically, you'll end up with a straight rectangular scarf in the end, but you have this diagonal pattern which kind of tricks your eye into thinking that it's knit in some other way, or that the shape is a little more dynamic than it actually is. So it provides a lot of interest for what is otherwise a very simple straight scarf. And what you do is you knit a triangle basically with increases on 2 sides. You start at the tip and you increase until you get to a measurement that will give you the width of your scarf. And then what you do is you continue increases just on one side while decreasing on the other. And that is how you achieve knitting on a diagonal like this. And then you just do this for the entire length of the scarf until you finish your last color, and you change to the end where you're going to do the final triangle. And how you achieve that is you do decreases on both sides until you get to the tip where you bind off. That's it. It's very simple. I do think a beginner could knit this pattern. As long as you know how to knit and purl, you'll learn a few other things through knitting this scarf, but nothing too difficult. The most important thing is that you keep track of which is the right side and which is the wrong side. And as long as you do that, you shouldn't have too much trouble with the increases and decreases. And you'll end up with a scarf that honestly I think is quite impressive looking, and looks a lot more complicated than it really is, and a lot more fashionable than what it is, which is a straight rectangular scarf. So it's very generous. It's great for wrapping up around your face. It can go around your head. It can also, it's great in these sort of in-between seasons where the wind might pick up or the sun might go behind a cloud and you want to wrap your face and neck so that you're protected against the cold. But then when the sun comes out again, you might get too hot. So maybe instead you'll just want to wear it simply as a scarf like that. Or if you're, say, sitting on a patio or out by a campfire or something and the front of your body is warm, let's say, you can keep the back of your body warm by wearing it like a shawl. So that's the Sagebrush Scarf, my very first pattern that I've written. And if you do happen to knit this, I would absolutely super appreciate constructive feedback on the written pattern itself, because I really want to make patterns as clear as possible, and I've tried to do that, but lacking help from an editor, it's always hard to catch your own mistakes, no matter how hard you try. So if you have any constructive feedback to offer, I would absolutely welcome it and greatly appreciate it. And then I will just say, it's not provided for in the pattern, but I do mention in the pattern that in order to do the color changes without having an overwhelming amount of ends to weave in at the end, and to help keep your tension, especially as a beginner knitter, you want to keep your tension consistent as you change colors. I recommend the 2-color spit splicing technique, and while I don't describe how to do that in my pattern, you can find videos on YouTube for how to do that, and I'm also going to be linking to another video of my own where I will provide a tutorial on how to do that. And coming up next in this video is the short tutorial on that pattern, so you can watch that now, or you can skip it and watch it later as a separate video. Okay, so I'm going to give you a short tutorial on how to do the 2-color spit splicing technique. This is a technique that I've used in my free pattern on Ravelry for the Sagebrush Scarf, and it is a great technique for doing color changes and saving you from weaving in all those ends at the end of your project. So let's get started. I've just done a little sample here, and I haven't finished the row because I actually want to start a new color when I begin the next row, and so I need to have a bit of forethought there. So if I want to change colors at the beginning of the next row, I'm actually going to plan ahead for my color change. I have 5 stitches left on this needle. So what I'm going to be doing is breaking the yarn that I'm currently working with. And what I do is I just take that yarn and wrap it around the needle 5 times. And what this does is it emulates the knit stitch. So it gives me the length, the approximate length that I'm going to need to knit those stitches. And so once I've done that, I also want to account for the joint that I'll be making with the new color. So I add about 1 inch or 1.5 inches and cut it there. And now I'm ready to join my next color. Now this is the spit splicing part. So you see there's different plies to each yarn. Now essentially I'm going to be attaching these yarns together, so I don't want a double thickness. So I'm going to remove a couple of these plies. So I've removed 2 of the 4 plies on that yarn, and I'll do the same on this yarn. So now I have a 2-ply here and a 2-ply here, and I removed about 1 inch from each. Now I'm going to join these yarns. I lay them alongside each other about where I removed some of the plies. I make an X, and I'm just going to fold each color back on itself. So I've attached them with a U-bend, and takes up approximately 1 inch or 1.5 inches, the amount of space that I allotted for that. And now what I'm going to do is take some water or just some spit. So excuse me for a moment. So I've wetted that joint, and I'm going to just rub it in between my hands and create a lot of friction. You can see it's already coming together. gonna go down a little bit, make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay, so you can see that these yarns, 2 different colors, are now spliced together as one strand, and I'm ready to knit. Now this is hopefully the magic part. So I'm going to go ahead and knit these 5 stitches left in this one color. Now I can see that I've already made a bit of a miscalculation. That is fine. I've already spliced these together, so I'm not going to do that method again. But I can tell that my next stitch is actually not going to be the color that I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is unknit those 5 stitches again. And I'm just going to have a bit of a looser gauge to try to take up more of that yarn space. And that's how you would just make sure your color change happens when you want it to. There, so that actually worked out really well. I just loosened my gauge and I ended up using up more of that yarn color. And obviously you could do the opposite. You could tighten your gauge if you needed to. And now when I knit this stitch, it'll be exactly the color that I want it to be. And I've successfully spit spliced 2 different colors together and changed colors in the body of my work. And I will not have any ends to weave in. And once I block it, these stitches will even out as well. So I hope that tutorial will help you in knitting your very own Sagebrush scarf and helping you in your future color work projects where you have to change your yarn. That has been an amazing technique for me. And the final finished objects that I want to show you today are not knitting, but I made them with stash yarn that I had. It's Alafos Lopi yarn from a sweater that I made ages ago, and I had like enough yarn that it wasn't just totally in the scrap pile, but it wasn't enough to sort of put back in my stash. It wasn't enough to knit something else with. So I always save all my yarn, by the way, even those little tiny scraps. I just throw them in a bag because you can always use them at the very least for stuffing a pillow or stuffing a toy or something like that. But I recently purchased some needle felting needles and decided to, instead of buying new wool for those projects, for needle felting projects, I just decided to use some of the wool scraps that I already had. And I made 2 little animals. I made an owl, and I also made a mouse. Now to do these, I just balled up some of my scraps, and I just used the same basic design for each of these. I made a larger ball, made a smaller ball, sort of needle felted them each separately so they were kind of shapely, and then I attached them together through felting. And then I just, at that point, had like 2 balls on top of one another, one on top of the other, and decided what animal to make from there. It's amazing what you can achieve by just having some sort of simple shape like that, and then deciding which features will best represent the form that you want to convey. So yeah, I'll just show you a close-up of those. This is the little mouse. And this is the owl. And if you've never done needle felting before, all it is, it's basically a fibers, mainly you should be using natural fibers, animal fibers, because they felt easily. It's a technique where you use a barbed needle to sculpt that fabric, basically. Usually you would use roving or batting, so entirely unspun wool. However, the Lopi wool yarn that I had, it's like super loosely spun. So after felting, it almost looks, you can kind of see the yarn a little bit, but I think that adds to the effect overall and provides nice texture, but it almost is kind of like using roving anyway. So that's just a neat little craft that you could consider if you're wondering how to use up the small scraps that you have that you really can't, you know, make a knitting project out of. Okay, moving along, I'll just show you some progress. It's not much to look at right now, but this is what I'm working on. I'm working on a little summer short-sleeved yoke top by Kate Davies. And she often, I've only done a few of her patterns, she often likes to write them bottom up, which while it does make fitting the garment a little harder, especially for me because I don't do gauge swatches, I haven't had that much trouble with it yet, I'll say that. And also, one nice thing about that is that you end up with a nice edge on the bottom. It's stretchy, you don't have to worry about that. Even like a simple cast on is still going to be stretchier than a simple bind off. And I find that the cast on edge looks quite a bit nicer than the bind off edge. Even the nicest bind offs that I can find, I kind of change my bind off with every pattern that I knit because I'm never really super happy with any bind off. If you have a favorite bind off that you like for its function, so something that's stretchy without being sloppy, and something that provides either a really nice decorative edge or an almost invisible edge, please let me know, because I've tried many of them and I'm just not satisfied yet with one. So I'd love to know what you use. But anyway, that's the advantage to knitting bottom up. And that's what I have so far. It's going to be just a cute little cropped lacy yoke t-shirt. And I'm about to start the lace section, so that'll be interesting and fun. And I'm knitting it in Isaga's Merlin or Marin. I can't remember what it actually is called. In my mind it's Merlin, but I think it might actually be called Marin. It is a fingering weight wool and linen blend yarn, and the linen is really nice in this. The wool is very soft, and then the linen provides this like roughness that's not itchy or anything, just a nice roughness. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just really nice. And if you're knitting this in the sun, I can catch almost like silky reflective bits from the linen. It's really beautiful. I really love it. It's very simple, very subtle. I will try to show it to you. You can kind of see it there actually. It just, it provides a texture that the wool just doesn't have. And it's a very subtle addition to the fabric that I really like. I think it provides a little bit of interest to what is otherwise a pretty plain yarn and a plain knit. So very happy with that. And then the other thing that I'm working on that I just started on, well, I planned for this, but I didn't plan to start knitting it so soon, but I cast on a couple days ago on the weekend and just got absolutely carried away with it. And I'll show it to you. So this is the back panel for what is going to be a Cowichan-Style cardigan. And Cowichan knitting, Cowichan garments are mainly sweaters, outerwear sweaters that were designed and knit by some of the native peoples in the west coast of Canada. And I don't know when these became popular. I think it was maybe in the 60s and 70s, certainly sometime in the 20th century. as part of a way to generate an income for smaller communities and to appeal to the tourist trade in those areas, I believe. And I don't know if they also farmed the sheep. I'm unclear about that part of the history, but they hand knit all these garments, and they were mainly for sale. And the real striking feature of these garments is the motifs that they would use. So this one is not a traditional pattern. It's just inspired by the style, but you kind of can get the idea. There would typically be some sort of stranded colorwork section in borders, sort of framing the blocked design in the middle, and typically those stranded colorwork sections might represent some sort of natural element like waves or something else like that that could be sort of represented in this linear design. And then in the main sort of part of the sweater, there would be a much more representative image of something. So something important to the culture. So in that part of the world, it's a coastal region, a temperate coastal region. And so you'd often see maybe whales or eagles, other sort of water creatures, maybe crabs, depicted in the main part of the sweater. So this one depicts moose. I don't even know if moose actually are on the West Coast. Maybe not on the islands, not on Vancouver Island, for example. Probably on the coast of BC, but I'm not entirely sure actually. And this one has a tree. So this one actually is much more fitting to where I live, because we do have moose, not where I live in Guelph, but in this part of Ontario, I guess. And yeah, so, and then the other feature of these sweaters, so one thing is it of course uses color work. It uses stranded color work, knitted flat, which was a new technique for me. And it also features intarsia knitting, a sort of blend of intarsia knitting with stranded color work. Both intarsia and color work knitted flat are new to me. So I learned them as I was knitting, and I have to say, as a person who's done lots of stranded color work, knitting it flat was very intuitive. So if you're considering knitting a color work piece flat, but a little bit afraid of the purl side, I would say if you have some experience in stranded color work, just give it a go. You might be surprised at how intuitive it is. And even if you don't get it right away, I think the actions will be very familiar to you as you work through it. So I would say give that a shot. It's definitely encouraged me to not shy away from some of the other patterns I have, that I'm planning on knitting, that I already have wool for, but that feature color work knit flat, that I've been a bit afraid of. This has showed me that that's not going to be that difficult. So that was wonderful. The intarsia, I will say I struggled with a little bit to start with. I watched several videos, and each video seemed to describe it differently. It had a different theory of sort of how it worked and the technique that you had to employ to get it to work. And I have to say, I found that quite confusing. And I tried a few different sort of techniques based on the instructions I found, and I found that they were hard to remember. It was hard to remember what I was supposed to be doing and why. And then it was, some of the techniques actually were just a bit too overkill. They were too bulky and had too many twists in them or something like that. So eventually I kind of just worked through it, just kept going. I didn't really unknit anything, I just kept trying it. And I eventually discovered that, at least it seems to me as a novice intarsia knitter, intarsia can be knit basically the way you do stranded color work. It's just a variation on that. And as long as you understand how to do, say, 2-color double hand stranded color work, intarsia can be worked very similarly to that. And once I discovered that, I sort of tested it by making sure I was doing the same thing every time, and it worked. And it was so easy after that, and I really understood what I was doing at that point. So that was sort of a breakthrough with intarsia. And I will also, once I do some of the other panels and really get a hang for it, I will make a tutorial for that as well and share that in the next episode, and also post that tutorial separately so you can just easily watch it if you would like to, and would like to see the technique that I use for intarsia. I really do think it's much easier than at least what I was finding in terms of instruction on YouTube. So yeah, I will be happy to share that with you, and happy to just go over that for myself and really have a clear understanding of what it is that I'm doing that works. So, oh, and this is, by the way, this is a pattern available, I believe, on Ravelry. I think it is, called Rocky Mountain Moose Sweater by Darling Deviants. And it's a great pattern. The other feature of these sweaters that I will just mention, of course, is the yarn. It's knit with unspun yarn. Unspun, what is sometimes called roving. And this particular one calls for 5-ply or 6-ply. So I actually have both here. It doesn't really matter too much. It kind of just blends in the overall sweater. But what it is strands of mostly unspun yarn, and it knits up as a super bulky weight yarn. And these here are Briggs & Little cakes. And this one is from Custom Woolen Mills, also Canadian, but located in Alberta, I believe, whereas Briggs & Little is located on the East Coast. This one is really beautiful. I love it. I love Briggs & Little too, of course, as you know, but these are quite different textures. This one is, it might just be the way it's caked up, but I don't think so. I think it's the way that it's prepared, because they're two totally different mills. This one is very lofty and very, very woolly and airy and fluffy. And it's really textural, like just rubbing your hand across, you can feel the texture and all the little woolly bits. It's really lovely, and I think I'm gonna end up with a whole cake of this left over, so I might make an entire sweater just out of this at a very loose gauge. I think it'll be absolutely lovely to wear. And this one though, because it's so light, I think they use a really gentle processing method. I think that's how it ends up being like this, so light. It means though that it is a bit weaker as well. So it's not an issue though. I had to sort of train myself not to pull too tightly on this. It's pretty robust, like you can pull still, but you know, I was yanking on it and breaking it that way. So it just took a little bit of getting used to for me, since I've never knit with this before, but it's absolutely beautiful. The Briggs & Little is much more durable. I don't know why. It might be the wool, or it might be the actual fiber that they use, but I think it also has to do with their methods for spinning at the mill that they have. It's just, this never accidentally broke on me. I could pull on it and nothing really happened. It's much more like their sort of heavier weight yarns actually, but really lovely as well. Okay, the final things that I want to show you. Final woolly thing is just this yarn that I bought recently for intending to make the Weekender Light by Andrea Mowry. And it's a farm yarn from Twin Pines Alpacas. outside of Peterborough in Millbrook, Ontario. So not local to me, but not too far away either. And they have the alpacas at their farm. They spin the yarn there, and I believe they also dye it there. And it is really, really lovely yarn. This is a 2-ply in a 200 yards, 3.5 ounces skein. It's 65% alpaca, 25% merino, and 10% bamboo. So the alpaca is silky and drapey and just really luxurious. The merino provides a little bit of structure and a little bit of dryness and maybe squishiness. And then the bamboo just provides a lightness, and the bamboo is very soft as well. If you've ever had, you know, I guess bamboo can be used to make textiles that are a little bit more sustainable. So you may have like a bamboo t-shirt or something like that that's like an alternative to cotton, an environmental alternative to cotton, and you'll notice that the bamboo has a lot more drape than cotton and is much softer. And I can really, even though it's 10%, I can detect it in this yarn very much so. And yeah, so I'm so curious to see how this knits up. I think it will be really, really lovely, really lovely. And I'll just show you the color a little bit. I'll show you their label, cute little label. And then the color, sort of like a warm charcoal gray, almost brown, but not like a gray brown, I would say, with this beautiful, beautiful creamy taupe color. And has a bit of a halo. That's from the alpaca. Yeah, so this is a gorgeous yarn. And they do everything in small batches. So I actually ended up buying, I think, at the time anyway, it was whatever was left of the batch of this yarn. And they very, very generously gave me a little partial skein that was left over from the production process that I guess is too big to sell as a mini skein, too small to sell as a regular skein. It's just not standard at all. So they just included it as a complimentary gift in my package, which is just so thoughtful and so lovely. And so if it doesn't get into my sweater, I mean, I could add like a pocket onto the weekender or something like that. That would be pretty cute. But if I don't decide to do that, I actually think this would make a beautiful bralette, maybe by Jessie May. It's probably enough for something like that. So it will go to very good use. And I'm getting tired. The final thing that I would like to talk to you about is what I hope you can see behind me. I will also post a picture, a close-up picture of it. This is a beautiful, beautiful wood-burned piece by my sister Sierra, who goes by the name Tattooing Wood Art on Instagram, and also on her shop on Redbubble. She's a very talented artist, very good at capturing the realistic elements in her drawings, and she loves drawing animals in particular, and she's very, very good at it. So we did a trade. I knitted her an Icelandic yoked sweater, and she made me this absolutely gorgeous piece of an Icelandic sheep, and it's absolutely stunning, and it's in my living room where I knit most of the time, so I really get to appreciate it on a daily basis. So just wanted to share that with you in case you would like to check out her artwork on Instagram, or on Redbubble. You can actually buy Redbubble prints artists' images on various objects, so like a coffee mug or a t-shirt or something like this. This is just like a little zippy pouch that I use for some of my knitting notions, like a cable needle, bobbins for intarsia knitting, that kind of thing. And it's they've just printed, you can select what you want on these items. And this is another wood burned piece that my sister did of a hawk. And she did this as a gift to a wildlife sanctuary for an auction. So yeah, so if you want like a lovely mug for your home, or if you want something practical like this for your knitting, but it's not particularly, it's not meant for knitting, but it works really well for knitting, and you like her images of nature, you can find her on Redbubble. So that's it for today. I would like to take advantage of what's left of the day to go out into the garden, and yeah, it's beautiful out there. We have daffodils coming up, and crocuses, muscari, lilies even, and there are buds on the trees. We planted some trees last fall that we didn't really even get to see in full leaf, so we're so excited to see how they fare this year and what their leaves look like. So yeah, so I'm gonna go outside now, and I'll see you next month in May, hopefully with some more lovely finished knitted items, hopefully some summer wear. And until then, I hope you also have some lovely knitting that you're working on, or some other lovely crafts, and that you're staying safe and making the best of your time at home, and enjoying the beautiful spring that we're having, or the beautiful spring that hopefully you're having wherever you are in the world. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye. Our resident bunny, one of two, one of many. Their cuteness is underrated.